We're coming up to the end of the year, so we wanted to go over 3 of our favourite pop-punk albums throughout 2024. Tim, let's get started.
Yeah, let's not mess around. Let's jump into it. The first one, which I'm almost certain we'll both have in our list, and that is The Story So Far, I Want to Disappear. What an amazing album this was.
Completely agree. I think this is The Story So Far continuing their incredible run of dropping pop-punk banger after pop-punk banger. Parker Cannon and his lyrics and his vocals throughout this album are some of the best I've seen in a pop-punk album in many years, not just this year, in many years.
The instrumentals throughout are absolutely phenomenal. The vocals are great. The lyrics are fantastic. I just wish there was a couple more songs after leaving us for 6 years. I wanted a little bit of a longer project, but this is the length that we come to expect from a Story So Far project, so I don't hate on them for that. I think it was very well-rounded.
One of my favourite things about this project in particular is the fact that there was different vibes, as in they brought it down to calmer, more emotionally driven songs, but then really brought the energy up in some moments. And I like it when a band has multiple areas in which they can explore and do them well.
Yeah, it's very solid from top to bottom. I would almost argue that it's a no-skip album, which is a rarity these days because we usually get a couple of flops, but for this, it goes from strength to strength to strength. And I struggle to pick a favourite track, but I've managed it. So shall we talk about our top 3 tracks for the album?
I don't have a top 3 tracks for the album, but I do have a favourite track, and that is Letterman.
Yeah, Letterman is fantastic. That's definitely up there in my top 3. I would also say Big Blind is a definite contender, although I still prefer the single version versus the album version. The album version is a bit more produced, whereas the single version feels very rough and raw, so I enjoy that a bit more. And my other one would be All This Time, which is just a classic Story So Far track, exactly what you'd expect when you hear the words pop punk.
One of the coolest moments this year as a pop punk fan was seeing Parker come out on stage with Blink-182 in Scotland and perform Carousel. 2 legendary bands, old and new, coming together, and I think that really shows the level of respect that they demand in the pop punk scene.
Definitely, and what a track for him to come out and feature on. Just an amazing scene, absolutely amazing. But let's move off The Story So Far now onto our second pick. I'll let you nail this one on.
So my second pick here is Jaden, When the Music Stops, and that is, I think this album is quite a hard one to quantify. We reviewed it earlier on in the year. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already and catch some deep dives into some of these individual albums. But when we reviewed it, there's a few tracks that I dislike, but there's enough content in there and enough songs that made it onto my playlist where I think from a relatively new and modern pop punk artist, it's really good to see the quality that he can put out.
It was very refreshing to see somebody that was new to the scene, relatively new to the scene, come out with songs that still, I think they will stand the test of time, and there are a couple of tracks on there that I really enjoyed, and it is classic pop punk.
And I think it was very well produced as well. Obviously on his first record, he did a lot of work with Travis Barker, and I'm sure that he influenced some of the tracks on this new one, but he stepped away from that a little bit, didn't rely so heavily on the legend himself, and just kind of put out enough pop punk bangers where the album could have been condensed, but it was still very good and definitely one of the best of the year in my opinion.
I'll move on to my second pick, which would be 4 Years Strong, Analysis Paralysis. That's a hell of a mouthful to say. This was a great addition to the 4 Years Strong discography. Features some of the heaviest 4 Years Strong songs that I think we've ever heard. Lots of amazing riffs and breakdowns throughout. Very energetic, very upbeat, and the heaviness for me is an added bonus because I'm somewhat of a creature of heaviness.
As someone that's not listened to much 4 Years Strong, is it really a pop punk album?
Oh, 100%.
Is it? I'm not saying it's not. I was just questioning.
They're a heavier version of pop punk, so they're pop punk with breakdowns. In the same way that I would say A Day to Remember's earlier stuff is in the realm of pop punk, this album is in that way. Previous albums, 100% pop punk. This one, very heavy, very guttural. There's some screams throughout, and you think, oh, they're going for a bit of a power here. But I do have a couple of tracks that I liked. We had Bad Habit, which had some amazing guitar riffs throughout and was just super heavy. Daddy of Mine, which is crazily heavy. I didn't expect this kind of song from 4 Years Strong, and I was very blown away by how they executed it. Wasn't something we'd heard before, so for them to go into a track like this and nail it, I was very impressed with. And we also had the opening track, which was Aftermath/Afterthought, and it had to be mentioned purely for the insane breakdown. I absolutely adored the breakdown and thought this album was phenomenal as a whole.
Well, I feel really bad because I didn't come with individual tracks for my albums, but I will move on to my last pick, which is Neck Deep's self-titled album that came out all the way back in January. And to be honest, when this album first came out, I wasn't a huge fan of it. It wasn't my favourite Neck Deep project, but it's certainly grown on me as the year has gone on. I think seeing them perform a lot of the songs live really made my mind come alive when it comes to listening to the recordings of them. And Neck Deep have been hitting it for years now. Again, similar to what we spoke about with the story so far, they have been so consistent. And I would go as far to say, I don't even think this is a controversial opinion at this point, Neck Deep are the best British pop punk band of all time, and definitely the best British pop punk band that are still active. This album, really energetic throughout pretty much the entire thing. There's very few moments where you feel like you can even catch your breath and take a minute and have a more relaxed moment. But I love it for that now. But it's like constant hardcore pop punk. And Ben's voice is incredible. Raspiness, whininess, exactly what you want when you're coming into this type of record. And I think it was very important for Neck Deep to get the self-titled correct, because the last album before this wasn't received as well as previous work. Coming back in with a self-titled, it says a lot, and I think that they did say a lot with this album and have gained even more popularity in America, etc. as well, which for me as an English pop punk fan is fantastic to see a band from Wales, admittedly, but from not too far from myself, do this well.
Yeah, as far as Neck Deep go, I don't think there's many other bands in the UK in that scene that have the kind of caliber that they do. The discography that they've got now is banger after banger. There was one or two where I was like, I'm not too fond of that, but mostly we've had nothing but great music from these guys.
I do want to mention that if my memory serves me correctly, they didn't get a UK number one with this, which was really upsetting because it was released on the same week as the latest Green Day album, which isn't on my list, but has been nominated for a Grammy, and I would say it is one of the best Green Day albums of the last 5 to 10 years. But I still don't think it was actually that great. And maybe that's a controversial opinion. It was good, but it wasn't amazing. It wasn't as good as the albums that I have already mentioned.
I think the issue there is that Green Day are just so big that even if they released a flop album, the sales that they would get would bash anybody out of the charts. And unfortunately for Neck Deep, they're only large in the UK, but I think even Green Day are bigger than Neck Deep are in the UK because it's Green Day.
It must be sad for them, though, when it's one of the legendary bands that I'm sure they look up to that happen to be releasing an album on the same week that stop you getting that number one.
Unbelievable. But I will move on to my final pick, which will be Bilmuri, American Motorsports. Now, this is an album that I don't think you would have listened to, and I don't think you'll even have heard of Bilmuri personally. But this is a solo project of Johnny Frank, who was the former clean vocals and rhythm guitar for Attack Attack. And this album, and Bilmuri in general, is a lot of genres. But I do think one of those genres is pop punk. It does fill that vibe. I want you to listen to this album after we've done this, because I think you'll really enjoy it. There's it's like hardcore, emo, funk, pop punk, and even a little bit of jazz in there. There's saxophone solos, there's violin solos throughout, and I strongly urge anybody who hasn't listened to this album, or Bilmuri as a whole, to go and check him out, because absolutely fantastic. This is a solo project. I'm just going to reiterate that. It's so amazing when somebody comes out with something that they've worked on their own and it has such a large sound. This is the first album that he released after being signed. Prior to this, he was an independent artist. So he obviously had to kind of hone in on his sound. His previous projects were a bit all over the place. This one seemed like he really found his footing and where to move forwards with it. And I can't wait to hear what's to come in the future if this is the level of quality we're going to get now that he's signed.
Well, it's one that I'll definitely need to check out because, as you say, I've never even heard of it. I've heard of American Motorsports before, though.
Yeah. Well, I've got a couple of tracks that I really enjoyed off this. We had Empty Handed, which has a sick ass guitar effect in the intro, and there's a sample in it which is the "and ladies and gentlemen, start your engines." The motorsports, which is a great sample to use. It's just absolutely perfect. Talking to Your Ghost. This gets a mention mostly for the kick-ass bass that's throughout it, and there's a sexy tone on the bass, and it just sounds great. And it's a great track, and there's a fiddle/violin solo in it that just works very nicely.
You just love a little bit of fun, a little bit of uniqueness in these tracks.
One more, I've got Straight Through You, which is a heavy-ass instrumental. He's got really chill melodic vocals over the top. I think those two styles work really well with each other, and there's a kick-ass saxophone solo in that track as well. Overall, a great project, very fun, very different, and bringing something to the music scene that I don't think we've seen before. So yeah, that will be my number 3 pick.
Well, we've brought our picks, Tim, but for a little bit of fun, I think we should rank them in terms of third, second, and first. Give our best pop punk album of the year. Do you want to go first or should I?
You can go first.
Okay, well, I'm starting. My third favourite pop punk album of the year was Jaden, When the Music Stops. My second is Neck Deep's self-titled record. And undoubtedly first, an unbelievable album from the story so far with I Want to Disappear. I do want to give a little shout out to State Champs with their self-titled record as well. Really enjoyed that. Think that was fantastic, but didn't quite creep into my top three. But what are yours, Tim?
So for me, my top three 2024 pop punk albums would be Bilmuri, American Motorsports, in at number 3. Number 2 will have 4 Year Strong, Analysis Paralysis. And in at number 1, the best pop punk album of 2024, undoubtedly, is the story so far, I Want to Disappear.
Well, we're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by New Year's. So hit the buttons, hit like and subscribe, and come back around for more pop punk content.
One thing that we never do, we don't ask people to share these about. So if you feel like you've enjoyed this list or you know somebody that should be listening to this kind of music, send it to them. Let them see it. Ask them to subscribe. Let's get everybody involved and let's get going. Thank you very much for watching.